everyone, it's me. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Alanna and I'm a Canadian, but I have been living here in the UK for the last 7 years, and recently my best friend from Canada came to visit. So what happened was she flew to London, spent a couple of days in London, then came down to Kent to stay with me for about a week. Then I sent her back through London and up into Wales to spend some time with her friend in Wales, then came back down to London and flew home. So it was a pretty big trip. So while she was stuck at the airport, I was like, hey, I know you're about to have 7 hours to kill. Would you like to help me with a video? So I asked her, what were your reactions about the UK? What was your experience like? What surprised you? Just tell me your thoughts. Just a quick side note, I didn't actually film content with her while she was here. Something that kind of sucks about being an expat is seeing your friends. So I get to see her once a year when I go back home. And last year I was sick for the entire trip. So I only saw her for about 2 hours. So having a week with her, honestly, I didn't want to film. I didn't want to do any work. I just wanted to hang out and spend time together. So I had a lovely time. She had a great time. If you want to see like more day-to-day life stuff, please come join me on Instagram. That's where I post all of, the friends stuff, the going out, the day-to-day life stuff. So if you're interested in that, please join me on Instagram. The link is always in the description. So without further ado, let's go. So number one, she talked about transit. Now this of course was quite a big element of her time here because none of us have a car, so she was getting around solely using public transport. So train primarily, but a couple of buses, also the tube as well. So a whole bunch of public transport. And something that really surprised her was that transit is way easier than she thought it was. Also quite convenient and pretty cheap compared to getting a cab. So I should say, in Canada, if you don't have a car and say you want to go out or something, or you need to get someplace, a lot of the times you are stuck using cabs, which are extremely expensive because in towns and villages, in Ontario where we're from, the buses suck and we don't really have any sort of train system. You have to usually drive to a train station. So when you are stranded, a lot of the time you end up getting a cab. So for her to be able to take the train, to take the bus, to take the underground, it was super convenient. It was cheaper than a cab. It's not super cheap, I'll say that. Cheaper than a cab though, and just way easier than she expected. So as a foreigner, it can be pretty intimidating to, catch a bus or a train in a foreign country because the UK, to us, is a foreign country. Obviously, I'm a bit more familiar, but it is a foreign country. It can be a little bit nerve-wracking, you don't know what to expect, but she said the transport was an absolute breeze. And I felt like a proud old mother that she could, catch the train and the tube like nobody's business, and I just loved it. Next up, we are talking about beer. So, as part of our time together, I really wanted to take her to a bunch of different pubs because I truly believe that no pub is the same. They all have a different vibe or aesthetic or just like overall atmosphere. So we tried to go to a bunch. And of course, I really wanted her to try what I guess I would call as like traditional Kent beers. Can I say that? That's what it is, isn't it? I don't know. I get a little bit nervous every time I talk about beers because people in the comments get really angry. And one of her opinions when it comes to beer is that flat, warm beer does not hit the same as a nice cold pint, which I have to say, I do agree. So because I'm in Kent, we were having pints like Bishop's Finger or Master Brew, like those types of beer slash ales slash I don't really understand beer, so I'm just gonna say beer even if that doesn't make sense. I hadn't really thought about it, but it is less common, I think, in North America to go to a bar and to have a flat room temperature pint like you do here. So while beer is not always my go-to and these sort of more traditional drinks are not usually my go-to. I do like them every once in a while. And she said the same thing. Like, it's a nice experience, especially when you're like in a really old pub. You've got the wood beams over top. You have, you know, a master brew or whatever. But it doesn't quite hit the same. In my opinion, those types of beers or ales or whatever you want to call them are very nice in the wintertime, you know, but when it's going into spring, summer, and it's getting like quite a bit hotter out, to have a nice cold carbonated pint just hits different. But one of my mottos is I think you should try everything twice. So I am more than happy to try flat, warm, non-carbonated pints or ales or beers or whatever you want to call them. Happy to try it. Happy to try it multiple times because you never know. And sometimes they fit in certain situations, like in the autumn or in the winter. You're in a beautiful historic pub. You have a pint of something very, very old. It's not carbonated. It's not cold. That just fits, if that makes sense. Next up, she has some advice for expats. Order a full English breakfast and don't be afraid of black pudding. It's delicious. Now, here's the thing. I love a full English, okay? I love it. To be honest, it's been actually a while since I've had one. I think I'm due a full English. Black pudding is not something that's very common in North America. Of course, a full English breakfast is not very common. You can get it, but it's more of like a novelty thing, you know? It's like when you go to a British pub in Canada, it's more of like a novelty, but they do exist. They're just not nearly as popular. Here, I mean, so many cafes, or even some pubs, you know, like will open and have a breakfast, have a full English. Just delicious. Personally, black pudding, I don't really care either way. If it's there, I'll eat it, but I wouldn't seek it out unless you're at a really nice, like, fancy place and the black pudding is like extra special. I think where I've had some kind of subpar frozen black pudding pucks, do you know the ones where you get a full English and it's like way cheaper than it should be, and the black pudding is just this kind of like, it's not that great, but a good quality one, delicious. I 100% agree. Next up, we are talking about distances. So as Canadians, the UK is not very big. It's very varied. It's varied, certainly, but it's not actually that big. So for her trip to do London, to do Kent, and to also spend time in Wales, like that's actually not that far away for us. But when she was telling other British people that, they were so surprised that she was traveling so much. For us in Ontario, you could drive for more than 10 hours in a particular direction and you will still be in Ontario. I do think British people take for granted how close things are. Now, that doesn't mean it's cheap. I know for me, I'd love to do more videos around the UK. Traveling is not necessarily cheap. Train tickets make me want to cry, but the distance is so much shorter than anything you'd experience in North America. But talking to British people in pubs or out at dinner, they were really surprised that she would travel so far in one trip, which to us as Canadians is crazy. Another thing that she experienced was when you ask for the washroom, there's a 50% chance that no one knows what you're talking about. This I have learned the hard way. So North Americans, washroom is like quite a polite way of asking where the toilet is, or bathroom. Restroom, I feel like is a little bit more American rather than Canadian, but maybe your language is a bit different depending on where you're from. But North Americans would never ask where the toilet is. It's just, it feels so impolite. But here, of course, in the UK, Brits like to be very direct when it comes to certain, not all the time, which is actually kind of surprising, but when it comes to toilets, they like to be very direct. There's a toilet, so you ask where the toilet is. You don't ask for where the bathroom is because there's no bath in it. It's not a restroom because you're not going there to rest and you're not going there to wash, so it's not a washroom. They like to be very direct when it comes to toilets. Where is the toilet? Even now, 7 years on, I hate doing this, but if I am at a pub or I'm at a restaurant or whatever, I will ask where are the toilets, because, you know, when in Rome. But inside, it feels so rude and like visceral. I don't know how to, it's just gross. And I hate doing it, but I will do it. I think as well, where we were not doing a lot of touristy stuff in Kent. So I was taking her to like small pubs and restaurants and a tea house and all that kind of stuff. We were not necessarily doing big tourist hotspots. So I think the British people that we were interacting with were not expecting a foreigner. Does that make sense? So you walk up to this, you know, server or whatever, and you ask, where's the washroom? I think it's actually quite jarring for them because they're not expecting to hear that. But I will say, I hate toilet. It's just a gross word. Next up, pubs. Again, however, we're not talking about beers. So she found it quite surprising that a lot of the people working the bar at the pubs that we went to were sort of older, kind of like grandparent sort of vibes in a non-offensive way, which is quite opposite in North America. So when you go out for drinks in Canada, back home, your server is typically gonna be like 20 and they'll be like in university, you know, because it's kind of like a young person thing. I kind of want to say that, I don't know if that makes sense. You're going out to a bar, you're going out to drink and like have cocktails, but even at like some of the breweries, that's a difficult word to say, a lot of the bartenders are just like young people. Whereas here in the UK, she was quite surprised that most of the people serving us at the pubs that we went to, and again, we went to a variety of sort of traditional type pubs and micro breweries, hard word to say. Pretty much everybody serving us was older. They were older. I don't mean that in a negative way, they were just older, and she was quite surprised by that. But I do think here, pubs can have a very cozy environment, a very relaxing, comforting environment. Environment. Oh. Pubs can have a very cozy environment. Thank you. So it does make sense to kind of have like a grandparent serving you vibe. I don't know, it just makes sense to me. Next up, let's talk about money. So this is kind of my fault because I forgot to tell her before she got here. But one thing she noticed is that the UK is definitely transitioning to cashless, particularly London, but lots of other places as well. And bringing cash was kind of pointless. And I should have told her, but I totally forgot. Recently, my partner and I went to Italy, and it wasn't until we were in the air that I realized that I had not brought any cash euros with us. And I think that was the first trip that I've ever done, like first holiday or vacation where I've not brought cash. And honestly, it didn't matter. Now, of course, if you go to really, really obscure places, like really, really non-touristy places, you're probably gonna need cash more often. But for me in Italy and for her here in the UK, cash was kind of pointless. Pretty much everything has a contactless option. Lots of the transport contactless. When I was buying us train tickets, I did it on my phone, you know, we would tap in and out. Taking the tube, you're tapping in and out. At the pub, tap for our pints. Like, so much of the stuff that we did was contactless. And of course, those places will accept cash, but it's not as convenient. And a lot of the times we would go do something, tap, pay for it, and then go sit down and be like, oh, should have paid for that with cash. So near the end of her time with me, we were like purposely trying to spend the cash instead of doing contactless because she didn't want to go home with a lot of cash. But for any expats that happen to be watching, I couldn't tell you the last time that I paid for something with cash. It's just not really a thing much anymore. Another thing that stood out to her was Wi-Fi. So she was coming to the UK, she was not going to use any of her roaming like on her cell phone or mobile. And I had said, when you get to London, there's gonna be a lot of places that will offer free Wi-Fi. So you shouldn't need it, but you know, we'll kind of play it by ear and see how it goes. And it ended up being a non-issue. She was telling me that basically everywhere she went, for most of her trip here in Kent, in London, and in Wales, every place had Wi-Fi. Like getting Wi-Fi was so easy. So she didn't have to turn on her roaming at all, which is really helpful when you're trying to save money because, you know, flights are not cheap. So if you can save money on your mobile roaming, then yeah, let's do it. Now, I don't think this would be as true in smaller villages or smaller towns. There's definitely times when you will be without Wi-Fi, but from her experience and her time here, wasn't even an issue. Just absolutely everywhere. And also, she was so shocked that trains here have Wi-Fi. And to be honest, I don't want to tell you how long it took me to realize that. So twice a week I live stream on Twitch. If you want to join the live streams, links are always in the description. And somebody had mentioned Wi-Fi on the trains. And I was like, what are you talking about? And then the next time I got on the train, I realized that the trains have free Wi-Fi. I don't want to tell you how recent this was because it was very recent. But honestly, it's an absolutely wonderful thing. Now, of course, it wouldn't be a Canadian perspective about the UK without talking about fridges. So here in this flat, we have a built-in fridge freezer situation. And shockingly, this is not the smallest fridge I've had in the UK, but for Canadians, it is quite tiny. So my friend, I wrote this down and made me laugh so much. I said, give me your perspective. She said, fridges. Y'all have the tiniest fridges. My house has 3 full-size fridges and a deep freezer. Where do you put all your stuff? I do think this comes down to distance traveled, in my humble opinion. So here in the UK, I will walk to the grocery store. And actually, when I'm done filming this, I need to walk to the grocery store because I forgot to get sour cream for dinner tonight. Even when I had a car, popping out to the shop to get a couple of things or to get meals for the next couple of days was not that big of a deal. It's kind of annoying. As you can imagine, in Canada, popping out to the shop could be quite a bit longer. So typically, Canadians and Americans will have larger fridges, will have larger freezers, so you can kind of like stock up on your food and you're not going to the shop every week. Because here, I will go to the shop multiple times a week. But my fridge also doesn't fit enough meals for like a long time. Especially in the winter time in Canada, if the roads are covered in ice, black ice, which is my personal favorite, you really don't want to be having to go to the shop, to go to the grocery store twice a week to stock up. So I do think, in my humble opinion, it's down to distances. It's way easier to get to the shops in the UK. Have a small fridge, it doesn't matter. I can top it up quite quickly. It's not a big deal. In Canada, your grocery store might be quite a bit further away, and it's just a hassle. So you stock up a big fridge or a big fridge freezer or like a big, you know, those big chest freezers, and you're good to go for quite a while. I will say as well, I asked her, all right, you're not gonna offend me, all right? You won't hurt my feelings. What were the worst things about your time in the UK? What was like the bad stuff, the things you didn't like, you know? What was the worst stuff? And honestly, I love her. She said absolutely nothing. So that makes me feel really good that she had a wonderful time here in the UK, because I do consider the UK my second home. It's been my home for the last 7 years, and it felt really nice to be able to share bits of what my life here is like with my Canadian childhood best friend, and she had a great time. So it made me feel really nice. But I will say, I did ask her, I was like, you know, give me the gossip. What did you not like? She couldn't name a single thing. So I am so grateful she had a lovely time. I'm so grateful that she was here and I got to see her and got to spend proper time together, because some years it just doesn't happen. So I hope you guys like this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to watch more content, how about this one? Guess what? I made my first ever quiche, a coronation quiche. It was kind of a disaster. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, bye!